Well, welcome everyone. I'll have a couple of comments and then open up to any questions that might be there. And we as Canadians find ourselves in one of the most challenging positions in recent history with the imposition of tariffs across the board of 25%, 10% on energy, electricity products heading into the U.S. An environment that really upsets one of the strongest economies in the world, the integration and the opportunity that we have to build on the North American economic strength that we have, as opposed to hinder it. And I think what we will find with the imposition of these tariffs on Canadian goods and Mexican goods, and I'll have more to add on that in a moment, is that they will be harmful to everyone, regardless of where you live in North America. Yes, they'll be harmful to Canadians, but they will also be harmful to Americans, increasing the inflationary environment, increasing the costs at the fuel pumps, increasing the costs at the grocery stores. But also decreasing jobs, and the job loss will be felt on both sides of the borders, and it will be decreasing the investment environment that we in Saskatchewan have worked very hard to ensure that is a viable investment environment. And I would say the investment environment in North America is going to be much less appetizing than it has been, and much less advantageous, again, for each of us that live in North America. I've been very clear from the beginning of this conversation with my comments around the imposition of these Trump tariffs on Canada, is we need to do everything that we can to engage and to de-escalate the talk of tariffs, the imposition of tariffs, and the talk therein, and not do anything to escalate this discussion. Our North American economy is very integrated and is much stronger when we are operating in a non-tariff environment, and it's incumbent on each of us as political leaders to do what we can to de-escalate any conversation or any talk around the imposition of these very, very harmful tariffs. We also need to do what we can to work alongside our largest trading partner, which is the United States of America. Now, I've said many times that we should take what President Trump says very seriously, but not necessarily literally. That being said, there has been the priority put on border security, illegal migrants maybe flowing back and forth across the 49th parallel or in and out of North America through any of our partner ports, as well as our airports. In addition to that, the availability of drugs, specifically fentanyl, in our North American communities has also been identified as a challenge by the Trump administration. We've taken action in this space in our province, and I'd say there's been action taken across Canada as well, with the $1.3 billion that has been invested by our Canadian government. In addition to that, you've seen action taken in Saskatchewan with refocusing some of our existing resources and being able to build up to 95 available officers should any need should arise along our 49th parallel. And I would say that the efforts of those law enforcement officers, whether they be the RCMP, whether they be our municipal officers or provincial law enforcement officers that we have, and all of them working together, are starting to show results, as you see some of the seizures of fentanyl and other drugs and other contraband substances that are happening not just in Saskatchewan but in other places of Canada as well. I would note, just as of this morning, and just very recent and high-level information, that it appears that maybe Mexico has received a 30-day reprieve on the imposition of tariffs from the Trump administration. And I would point to a proposal that I had provided on one of our First Ministers meetings and provided publicly, where Canada would have the opportunity to pull the Canadian Border Security Agency, or the CBSA, in under our military. It would provide two things immediately. One, provide the availability for troops along our border, the 49th parallel between Canada and the U.S., thereby addressing concerns that President Trump has raised. And two, would bring our CBSA funding in under the military investment, would be part of ensuring we are working towards our 2% NATO commitment that we have. This is an advancing situation, as I understand it, with respect to the conversation between President Trump and Mexico. And I would hope, and I've urged and I've reached out to Minister Dominic LeBlanc, to reconsider the proposal that I had provided earlier, and if that has any merit in advancing this conversation, de-escalating the imposition of tariffs on on Canadian businesses and ultimately Canadian families. What do we need to do as we move forward? And I would say each of us has an opportunity to participate in engaging with contacts that we may have in Canada and south of the border, in the industries and in the careers that we spend and friends that we have each and every day. We're certainly doing that at the political level, engaging with political leaders, decision makers throughout the U.S. on what a strong, integrated, growing North American economy can do, and the food and energy security that the province of Saskatchewan brings to that conversation. Businesses and industry have equally an opportunity to engage up and down their supply chains with U.S. businesses, with U.S. partners that they may know, and I would encourage them to do so, and each of us as individuals do as well. In addition to that, our provincial engagement is extending beyond the U.S. As you know, I'll be in Washington next week, followed very quickly by spending a short period of time in Mexico as well. Mexico is a market of interest, an export market of interest for Saskatchewan, and becoming increasingly a much stronger trading partner with the introduction of USMCA a number of years ago. We export over $1 billion to Mexico the last year or two, and we'll be spending a short period of time in Mexico engaging with decision makers there as well. Our Ministry of Trade and Export and Development, Warren Keating, was out Friday for a Minister of Trade meeting to look at removing what interprovincial barriers we may have through the CFTA, and our encouragement at that meeting was for all provinces to remove as many or all of the exemptions that they have to that CFTA trade agreement, and to encourage the federal government also to equally take seriously the importance of removing the exemptions that the federal government has in the CFTA, and the largest number of exemptions in that agreement is the federal government. We're actively looking at can Saskatchewan remove all of those exemptions, or certainly remove most of them. I think we have 7, maybe 8 as we speak. I've asked our Trade and Export Minister to remain in Ottawa for an extra couple of days as he is engaging with numerous ambassadors from other markets of interest. Saskatchewan, as we know, is 55% reliant when it comes to the percentage of our exports on U.S. trade. We are likely the least reliant on the U.S. when it comes to our export market of any province in Canada. We need to further diversify and further engage the trade that we do and the exports that we provide to over 160 countries around the world, and our Minister of Trade and Export is engaging on that front as we speak. Again, we are going to focus not only on our engagement in the U.S., but our engagement using the contacts that we have made over the course of the last number of years around the world. And I would add that at times we've been criticized for that engagement and the focus and the priority that we have put on that engagement and growing our market share and growing our opportunities for exports and growing our investment attraction effort in countries all over the world. The fact is that Saskatchewan is very much a significant supplier of food and energy security for the people that live in this province, this nation, live on this continent, and to over 160 countries around the world. I would close just by saying this. No one wants to be in the situation that we currently find ourselves. Likely the most challenging situation in recent history, and certainly may well be one of the most challenging situations that we've seen since we've last been involved in any actual wartime conflict. This is going to have an impact on our agricultural producers up and down the supply chain in the ag industry in Saskatchewan. It will have an impact on our miners up and down the supply chain as well, all of those involved in the mining industry, whatever the product might be, our oil and energy workers, as well as our retailers in our urban centers and in our communities across this province. This will have an impact, and I would implore on our federal government to work alongside the provinces, as they have been, but to ensure they are always looking at options like we saw in Mexico this morning to have these tariffs removed, if it even is for a short period of time, so that we can further our engagement and further the integration and further the opportunity that we have to implore on one individual, President Trump, that seems bent on using these tariffs in some way, shape, or form to destabilize the investment environment that we have in North America, to destabilize the energy and food security that we have been able to acquire in North America over the course of the last number of decades and maybe even the century, and the significant role that Saskatchewan plays in this. And again, I would just say that everything that we do as leaders, political leaders, business leaders, community leaders, needs to be focused on the long term. It needs to be focused on de-escalating the conversation around imposing tariffs on one another, de-escalating the conversation around harmfully reducing the opportunity that we have in that strong, growing, and vibrant North American economy, and focusing on ensuring that these tariffs are removed as soon as possible, like it appears they may have been for a period of time in Mexico this morning. So, with that, I'd open it up to any questions. Phil?
Yeah, can you clarify your position on, we now see retaliatory, Canada's plan for retaliatory tariffs. We've seen other provinces take U.S. liquor off the shelves. I know the regime here is different than it is in Ontario,
Yeah.
Manitoba, Quebec, elsewhere.
Yeah.
What do you think are you for no retaliatory tariffs whatsoever, and what do you think specifically? I mean, you are still the wholesaler on for liquor here, so
Yeah.
what do you think about that?
Yeah, and so there's some provinces that are making specific decisions, whether it be on things like liquor that's available in their publicly owned stores, public systems that we have in various provinces, as well as procurement. There's other provinces making decisions around procurement. We're looking at what opportunities Saskatchewan might have in that space. Not to say that we would act on any of those non-tariff or retaliatory measures. However, we are looking at what opportunities we might have that could go under consideration. Again, I've been very clear when it comes to tariffs of any kind, whether they be retaliatory tariffs, counter tariffs, or whether they be the initial tariffs that are imposed by President Trump. They're harmful to everyone that lives in North America. The small, sweet, or growing now first instance of retaliatory or counter tariffs that the federal government has imposed has grown from its original iteration, and unfortunately it's necessary. Unfortunately, it is necessary. If we find ourselves in a broad tariff war or trade war where everything that is flowing north and south is subject to tariffs, Canadians will lose that. We are an exporting province and we are an exporting nation, and we should not be heading that direction. That should not be the goal, and we should not be openly discussing what that might look like, because the goal and the focus and everything that we do needs to be heading exactly the other direction, where we are removing the tariffs that could potentially be imposed, whether they be President Trump's tariffs or the counter tariffs that have even been proposed by our Canadian government. So we unfortunately do support the first suite of counter tariffs that have been introduced. Looking at the second list that is there, are not supportive in any way of export tariffs that would be tariffing, whether that be electricity coming out of Manitoba, Quebec, into the U.S., or whether that be energy or potash products that are coming out of our province or Alberta. And most certainly, I think we have, if this is the case in what has happened between the President Trump and his administration this morning and the President of Mexico, where their tariffs have been granted a 30-day reprieve due to placing a number of military personnel along the border. We have that opportunity as well, and it was a suggestion that I had brought forward a number of weeks ago.
So you would consider something with, say, alcohol, that I know might be more symbolic than it is?
Yeah, a few $1 million in the scope of what the broader North American economy is probably at its core not going to change a lot. However, there is Tennessee and Kentucky bourbon on the list of original counter tariffs for a reason. If you are able to make moves in certain areas that do change the hearts and minds of decision makers, policy makers in the U.S., this has proven to be not the only thing that is effective, but to have some effect going back to the disputes that we've had when it comes to country of origin labeling over a decade ago. I was been on the phone as recently as this morning with a number of steel manufacturers, both north and south of the border, and we've faced a similar discussion not that many years ago under the previous Trump administration when it comes comes to steel and aluminum tariffs. And so this is not new ground for us having these discussions. However, what we're discussing today is much broader, deeper, and will have a much more significant impact on North American families and the jobs that are created by investing in the North American economy.
I'm sorry,
Regarding
regarding
jobs,
Go ahead.
Regarding jobs, last weekend you just stated that you will do anything to protect Saskatchewanese jobs. How many jobs are we talking about, and what exact measure are you talking about, despite de-escalated?
I'm not talking about any specific measures outside of looking at what tools the province may have at some point in time and would not act on at this point in time, but may have at some point in time if they're needed. What I'm seeing today is there's another path for us to at least explore, as it seems to be a path that is providing some success to Mexico, who is dealing with the very same administration and president that we are. The impact on jobs is a little bit more difficult to break down, specifically on what a 10 or 25% tariff long-term might be on employment in industries in Saskatchewan or North America for that matter, but I would say that it's all detrimental. It is all detrimental. And the impact on the broader economy, let's say the GDP or export value, is a little bit easier to quantify. I think first and foremost, you can make the assumption that in our province we export about $50 billion of product. Just under 30 of that goes to the U.S. and a 25% tariff broadly on all of that, which it isn't because a significant portion is oil, which is at 10%, but a 25% tariff across all of that is about $7.5 billion that would be paid to the Trump administration over the course of a year. Again, our goal is to de-escalate that conversation and to do what we can in addressing what our largest trading partner has indicated are his concerns. Mexico seems to have been able to address this, and again, there will be more details coming out over the course of the day. And I would hope, and I'd urge, and I have urged already, our federal government to engage in a similar conversation, and it might have a similar outcome for Canadian families.
So no numbers?
Sorry.
Just wanted to clarify, sorry, the retaliatory tariffs, are you supportive of that, or you said it was necessary?
Yeah, unfortunately, the suite of tariffs that may go in tomorrow, the counter tariffs, the first, I think it's about $30 billion, unfortunately are necessary. But I would say that we do have an opportunity for further discussion, whether that be with Minister LeBlanc to Secretary Lutnick, or whether it be on the phone this morning between the Prime Minister and President Trump directly, which I would say would be a great avenue for the Prime Minister to commit, and I would be the first to support this federal government in bringing the CBSA, or the Canadian Border Security Agency, under an arm of the military. That would provide military troops the opportunity to be very present on our 49th parallel, and maybe even in our airports if necessary, but to be very present to address concerns that President Trump has raised. And I think Canadians share those very concerns as well. Anything we can do to remove fentanyl from our communities is going to be viewed as positive by the families I talk to.
Doug Ford and David Eby have not been talking about fentanyl in response to the tariffs. Why are you?
Our largest trading partner has raised that as being one of his primary concerns, that and border security. What we're seeing in just early conversation this morning is the Mexican government, by placing their troops alongside the border to stop the flow of not only fentanyl but illegal migrants, seem to have, and it appears to have, been able to have a 30-day reprieve on these tariffs. Understanding the damage, daily damage that these tariffs would do to the North American economy and the Saskatchewan and Canadian economy, we'd hope that we would have the opportunity for a parallel conversation coming from our federal government to President Trump's administration. And as I said, I would be supportive of that and have encouraged the federal government to partake in that discussion sooner rather than later.
This morning, U.S. Senator Chuck Grassley called for a tariff exemption on potash from Canada, with Saskatchewan being the largest potash producer in the world. Is that something you want as well?
We want all of the tariffs removed. The challenge, and herein lies the pain that will be felt on both sides of the border. And this is one example, but there's many. There's about 9 million tons of potash that are utilized by American farmers. 90% of that comes from Canada, which comes all from Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan is the largest provider of potash in the world, with close to 25 million tons, and more coming in the years ahead as we see potash mines coming into production. 90% of 9 million tons that American farmers use. The other options to access that product would be a place like Russia or Belarus, not anywhere near as politically stable, or I would say allied, as traditionally Canada has been with the U.S. Further to that, physically, there just isn't the operational capacity to move that amount of potash across the ocean, yes, but up the Mississippi into the Corn Belt where it is ultimately needed. And so the U.S., this is a great example of the partnership that we have with the U.S., the North American integration of our economy and the advantages of it. The U.S. is able to access the largest, most secure, and an allied nation, I might add, their potash supply for their American farmers to provide food security for Americans and to export that corn and other products to countries around the world like we do right here in Saskatchewan. One example of how harmful these tariffs can be to each of us in North America, regardless of whether you live north or south of the 49th parallel.
Isn't the firearms a bigger problem for Canada coming from the U.S. than the drugs coming from Canada to the U.S.?
I think any contraband, whether it be firearms, drugs, or illegal migrants that's crossing the border north or south, we should all do our level best to ensure that's not the case. Any contraband that is in an individual's pocket in one of our communities needs to be removed as well. That's why we had put a number of provincial police officers that will be focusing on that, 20 to 50 kilometers near our border crossings. Right at the border crossing is the responsibility of the CBSA and the government of Canada. And I would say that if they brought that in under the military arm, we could have our military present there as well. What we did actually was through some conversations that we had, for example, with the state of Montana, where they are doing something similar on the southern side of the border. And so if you have state troopers and state law enforcement officers for the 50 kilometers south of the border, you have provincial officers having a focus on the 50 kilometers north of those border crossings, and you have a robust border crossing system that is working in lockstep, whether it be American border officials or Canadian officials. I think we can very quickly secure the borders that we have. However, we all need to make efforts, and I would share in the President's concern when it comes to the scourge of illegal drugs, which aren't drugs at all in today's day and age, are poison. Removing that from our communities and removing it from North America altogether, because when it comes to property crime, drugs, and some of the crimes that we're seeing, and some of the fallouts and the social challenges that we're seeing, unfortunately, with people that have all too often had mental health challenges and subsequent addiction challenges, these drugs need to be removed from our communities. And so I agree with President Trump when it comes to doing our level best to ensure that that occurs. And you've seen those initiatives over the course of the last few months and the last few weeks in this province as well.
The most recent comments from Mr. Trump this morning, I believe, had nothing to do with the border or security or fentanyl or anything like that. He said Canada's been unfair trade-wise, and we've heard that from him before. I mean, do you think there's validity there, or do you think you can ever actually pin down why he's doing this? Some people speculate he just wants the revenue from tariffs, so he can offer a tax break to buildings.
There's many words and much speculation that circulates in this conversation. And again, I would just go back to a very strong statement that was made by an individual on a national show here in Canada that I've repeated many times: is take what the President says very seriously. But not necessarily do you always take it literally. He has prioritized time and time again border security and the flow of fentanyl. I've said time and time that I'm equally concerned about the flow of fentanyl into our province, and that's why we've invested in law enforcement and continue to invest in recovery opportunities for, unfortunately, individuals, family members, and community members that may have succumbed to that poison that someone has made available in Canada, in North America, and in communities in Saskatchewan. And so there is a broader discussion on trade, imports and exports That will likely happen at some point in the very near future as we, I'm sure, start to talk about the parameters of the USMCA agreement that was signed under President Trump in his previous term just over 4 years ago. I was down with a number of other premiers and Chrystia Freeland at the time at the conclusion of those negotiations to meet with Robert Lighthizer. So I think we'll have much opportunity to discuss the flow of imports, exports north and south of the 49th parallel. And I would say that the engagement that we're undertaking now and the engagement that industries and the business community that is undertaking now is not in vain. It all sets the platform and the grounding for what we can do when we work together. The integrated economy is no accident. The North American integrated economy across that 49th parallel is no accident, and I would say it's highly efficient, and we should respect that, and that should be the grounds from which we negotiate any trade agreement and focus on, how do we reduce the barriers to trade across that border? How do we, as a Canadian partner in the North American alliance and the North American economy, ensure that we are doing our level best, living up to our commitments when it comes to a 2% commitment to invest in NATO, living up to our commitments and removing, drugs and illegal migrants and not allowing them into our communities and into our country. I think there's a broader opportunity for discussion as we move along, but the engagement that's occurring now definitely is going to set the framework for that.
Will you reconvene the legislature to deal with the threat of this threat?
To do what?
To reconvene. You don't think you can do anything to reconvene the legislature?
What would we do?
They're ready to work with you. Carla just stated it multiple times.
She wants to put up billboards in the Chicago subway. Chicago's in Illinois, and it is a market of interest for us as Saskatchewan, as we export and do import from Illinois. However, if you're trying to influence policy and decision makers that are close to President Trump, they have a Democratic governor, 2 Democratic senators, and their entire House representatives are Democratic as well. And so they are not in the influential sphere of the Trump administration. However, they're equally important for us to engage with as a province of Saskatchewan as well. We don't need to reconvene the legislature to put up some billboards in the subway of the Chicago in the community of Chicago. We have in the past advocated in a similar way. I believe it's a Financial Times. We had run full-page ads. They go right into Washington, D.C. a number of years ago. We had done that. I believe we were criticized by the very same of the leader of the opposition for that outreach and that investment, not only in the U.S. but in other markets around the world. Well, thankfully, we didn't listen to that criticism and have doubled down our investments in the last number of years in advocating for access of Saskatchewan products to global markets. And thankfully, those points of communication and those marketplaces and the individuals that we've built relationships with are going to be very crucial moving forward. None of them are in the Saskatchewan legislature.
Well, following up, what about support for potentially affected industries? Are you in a position to do that without recalling the legislature?
That is a discussion that we have had on our First Ministers meetings with the federal government as to, what industries may be impacted as we find our way through this discussion. I'd point out that tariffs are not on today. They're planned to come on, tariffs and counter-tariffs, tomorrow. It looks like there has been a window, and things move quite quickly in this conversation. It looks to me like there's been a window of opportunity for Canada to engage in a similar vein that Mexico has engaged, and it looks to me like Mexico has been able to have some success and to buy some additional time, another month, before those tariffs potentially could be imposed on Mexico. And it would be my hope that as the day progresses today that we find that our nation and our federal government is engaged and is enjoying some of that same news later today. It's not the end of the conversation, but it opens up some more time. And so discussions around advancing and expanding counter tariffs, discussions around how to support industries as we find our way through this conversation are important, and they are happening, I can assure you, at the First Ministers meeting and within each, not only the federal government but within provincial governments as well. However, the time for those decisions is not here yet.
How do we de-escalate?
Pardon me?
How do we de-escalate? Can you give us some examples of what that means?
I'd say Mexico provided a pretty good example this morning.
But We've already done it. Multiple provinces done it. The federal government done it to put more people at the frontier, the borders, to prove that we were doing our job, and still we have the tariffs.
Daniel Smith invited Fox News down to have,
You're advocating for Fox News to
No,
come
I'm
up to
saying
Saskatoon?
Daniel Smith at Fox News
Yeah.
go down and look at what they're doing at the border. So I
And
mean,
it's not enough. So what can we still do to prove that it's enough? Will it ever be enough for the President of the United States?
Well, it seems that Mexico has found what is enough. It seems that Mexico has had a month reprieve of the imposition of tariffs on their nation, and we would ask that the federal government engage in a similar vein of discussion. And that would be an example of what we're seeing in the case of the Trump administration, USA and Mexico. The talk of tariffs has de-escalated for at least a month. We would hope that we could have that same announcement later today when it comes to the Canadian relationship with the U.S.
So when it comes to travel, are you asking people of Saskatchewan to maybe reconsider their plans to go down south, even including those border communities that may do regular shopping trips to the U.S.?
Yeah, you know what I would say is we should always be focused on supporting local, whether that be our community, our region, our province, or our nation, in any way that we can. And I think that's even more important now. Traditionally, I would say, in the absence of this discussion on tariffs and the threat that brings to what I call the North American economy, I would also consider our continent to be local, and we should be purchasing products here in North America before we're looking abroad. And I still believe that to be the case. However, that we're in a very muddy discussion right now with our largest trading partner, and particularly the President of the United States of America.
And long-term wise, what will we do to protect Saskatchewanese people from our dependence to the United States, but also to the fact that we are a province that only pretty much produce first matière première,
Yeah.
instead of being transforming this all those products.
Two things. The first you're seeing happen is to increase the value of the exports that we are producing here in Saskatchewan. You're seeing us now export much more canola oil than canola seed, canola meal. You're seeing us climb the value chain when it comes to many of our ag products. And I would say that when it comes to producing and some of the protein fractionation that's happening, that's a much higher value product than a split pea or just a boatload of peas or lentils that are going around the world. And so we are finding our way up that value chain. You're seeing investments in refineries, whether that be in Lloydminster, Regina, or even Moose Jaw, with the recent investment there from a few years, probably 5 or 6 years ago now, at the Gibson's refinery. And so we are climbing that value chain, and it's showing in our export value. In 2007, our export value in this province was about $17 billion. In 2018, that climbed to about $31 billion. And most recently, the last 2 years, it's been about $49 or $50 billion each of those years. The export value is how we create wealth in our communities. We are an exporting province. You're either working in an export-based industry or you're servicing industries that are in that export space. And so the first thing that we're doing is focusing on attracting investment that's increasing the value of the products that we are producing here, so that we're not just shipping raw products around the world. The second thing is to ensure that we are investing in relationships from a province to nation and province to industry perspective in markets of interest around the world. And this is where we've been criticized from time to time. We've opened up trade and investment offices, one, to attract investment into Saskatchewan, but two, to ensure that we have market access into those countries. And when we run into challenges with that market access, and we have in India and China, that we are on the ground and we have the relationships built to work our way through whatever those challenges might be. That is part of how we have been able to retain market access in countries where we have had challenges like India, China, the European Union as well. And I would say that those very same relationships that we have formed throughout the United States over the course of the last number of years are going to help us find our way, whatever that looks like, through this conversation with the Trump administration.
I'm not sure I heard a clear response to her question about travel. We've heard people, and I think it was Premier BC asking people to reconsider travel in the States. So are you asking people to do that, or are you not?
Yeah, well, people can do what they like, first of all. Second is, maybe I'll be more clear. What I've always said is we should, support those that are local to us. If you can support someone that's local to your community and what you're purchasing or the travel that you're doing, you should do that. That would extend to your region, to your province, to your nation. And I would say under normal times, I would even extend that to North America. We should support. Our U.S. is traditionally our largest ally, despite what seems to be happening right now with these harmful economic tariffs that have been introduced, not yet in action, but been introduced by President Trump. So right now, I think people should use their own judgment. And if you are in any way unhappy with what President Trump is doing, you might want to consider, your winter or summer vacation much closer to home. I know I did this winter, as I have not went anywhere. Maybe even for a couple of winters now, and any of my travel abroad is strictly work-related at this point.
When you say when President Trump speaks, you should take him seriously, but maybe not literally. Could you talk about what you take literally from his comments?
Well, over time and time, the theme has been really three things. The trade imbalance that he views, which is not actually the way I certainly would look at it. I view the trade that we do back and forth across the 49th parallel actually builds a much more integrated and stronger economy and creates jobs, North American jobs that benefit both of us, whether we be Americans or Canadians. Second, repeatedly, there's been discussions around border security. And third, around the flow of fentanyl into all of our communities. And I think the flow and unfortunately the overdose rates that we're seeing largely from fentanyl in Canada and in Saskatchewan are far too high. I don't think they're far off from what they're seeing in U.S. cities either. And I think this is an opportunity for us to work together on locking down, clamping down, not allowing some of the precursor chemicals into our continent, let alone into our nation, and so that we don't have the amounts of fentanyl in our communities harming our friends and all too often our family members. This is something we should be working on behalf of Canadians, not just because President Trump has requested it.
Just lastly, what do you say to Saskatchewan companies and people who will be paying more for items now?
I would say that we have an opportunity today to at least delay, like Mexico has, the imposition of these tariffs tomorrow. And I think that is a great opportunity for our federal government to engage with the Trump administration on. I've encouraged them to do so, and I would hope that they have some success with that, and I would be the first to applaud them for that effort. Moving forward, this is going to have an impact on Saskatchewan residents, on Canadians, and on North Americans. It's going to have an impact when you go to the fuel pumps. It's going to have an impact when you go to the grocery store. And in some areas, unfortunately, it's going to have an impact, the job loss. And I think if we're not able to avert the imposing of these tariffs tomorrow, you will see and hear of that impact sooner rather than later, not just in Canada, but also in the United States of America. And so I'm not going to say there isn't going to be a negative impact by the actions of President Trump. It is going to be a negative impact, not just on us in this province, not just on us in the nation of Canada, but on the entirety of North America. And I would put forward that is benefiting other people that live in other continents, in other nations that may not be as allied as Canadians and Americans normally have been.
So will we obey Trump demands for the next 4 years, or will there be a line somewhere?
Pardon me?
Will we obey every Trump's demands for the next 4 years, or will there be a line?
Well,
because in a month, if they decide that he didn't do enough, Mexico didn't do enough with the border and the protection, and they ask for something else, will we be jumping at that time? Will be obeying him and doing everything he wants?
Well, President Trump is the President of the United States of America, not the Prime Minister of Canada. We have a Prime Minister that's leaving, probably going to have another one, and maybe even a third, all in the span of a few months, which is not helpful to the stability of this entire discussion, and I've been quite clear on my views with respect to that. It's not about obeying your largest trading partner. It's about engaging with your largest trading partner. And, you know, as I said, in Saskatchewan, about 55% of our exports do flow to the U.S. About 80% of our imports come from the U.S. as well. We are the least trade dependent of any province in the nation. And so the other provinces, yes, are taking much more of an eye, and I'm not to say we aren't in any way, but are much more concerned with respect to the impact on their economies when the President of the United States says, if you don't do this, we are going to impose a 25% tariff across the board. That has an impact. It's worthy of discussion. That's what we have been busy with as a subnational leaders, engaging on the opportunities and the positive aspects of the integration and trade across that border. We're going to continue to do so. So it's not about obeying one another. It's about engaging and changing, and many are there, but changing the minds of one individual. In this case, it's the current President of the United States.
What are you hoping to accomplish from your trip to Washington?
It would be the de-escalation of any talks with respect to tariffs and the re-escalation of the strong, vibrant, growing economy that we have in North America that is very, very integrated across the 49th parallel. Now, do I think that a subnational leader going to Washington is going to be able to do that in one trip or one engagement session? Likely not. But it is the multiple conversations and opportunities that I have, business leaders have, other premiers have, as well as the engagement that our federal government puts forward, that ultimately will have a difference. It proved to have a difference at, I would say, in previous challenges that we had, and I look back to the steel and aluminum tariffs from about 4 or 5 years ago. I look to the country of origin labeling discussion that we had just over a decade ago. I look to, you know, some of the phytosanitary discussions that we've had with the country of China over canola imports into our exports, their imports, as well as some of the discussions we've had around the agri-food products going into India. It's not about, you know, listening to or obeying what other national leaders are saying. It's about engaging with them so that they can understand what the true value of trading with a province like Saskatchewan, a nation like Canada, is in adding to your food security, your energy security, and in the case of a place like, you know, Ontario and Quebec and Saskatchewan, manufacturing security that we can provide. This is a beneficial relationship and has been proven to be so for you know, many, many decades. And it is my true hope that we never lose sight of where we want to get this back to. In the short term, you know, there's escalating talks around tariffs and counter tariffs, and are you going to, you know, pull liquor off the shelves, and are you going to do this and do that? We should never lose sight of what we want this to look like when it's over. And what I would like it to look like is a symbiotic relationship. Yes, there will be some competition across the border, but there will be some opportunities for us to engage as well, providing one another with energy security, food security, and ultimately working together to ensure that we have general security for our continent. And that's a space as well that I think Canada has a role to play in ensuring that we very quickly achieve our 2% commitment under NATO. Bringing the CBSA in under our military spend would help us in doing part of that and may alleviate the tariff situation that we're faced with as early as tomorrow.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, everyone.